You know, as a young kid, I collected duck calls and was always fascinated with old calls. I just like the way they look, the shape they use, the history behind the call makers. Just always kind of been fascinated with that. Last year when I started JStephens Calls and got to do my own calls, that's one of the things that I wanted to implement was one, the styling of the older calls back then, and I wanted to try to implement some of the influences of these different call makers and their styles for a couple different reasons. I mean, one was because I liked the way the style looked and I liked the way their calls looked. The patina on the older calls, the oil that they used back then, the oil finishes, just something that I thought, you know, if I could implement some of these influences from some of these different call makers and maybe actually give a little bit of history behind the calls to let other people know about these call makers. When I set out to design some of the calls, the first few calls that I made, I took some of the influences of some of my favorite call makers and tried to kind of mash those up and come up with a call that would represent their qualities, but at the same time be my own design. And I also wanted to try to give that vintage look that they had back then of calls that used, whether it was oil finishes or different things that really had a nice patina. I wanted my calls to look like older calls, but stand on their own, have influences of the other call makers, and be able to educate people about them. So the first one that I actually came up with, this is the tall version. I'll make a short version and a tall version, but this is what I call the improved call, and it was kind of a different shape, and we kind of nicknamed it the Wierdo at the same time, but this is a JStephens improved call. And what makes this call cool to me and special is that a lot of influences, and really where I came up with the design was from a call maker named Charles Grubb, who was from Illinois, and he and F.A. Allen both were really the first two duck call makers that has been documented in advertisements. He made them in the late 1800s. But if you look at this call, especially compared to some of his earlier calls here, you can see a lot of the similarities. Exactly like it, but you can definitely see the influences. And his is called the Improved, so I named this call the Improved. Popping.